December 19th, 1944. On a snow-covered plateau east of Bastogne, 3 hastily built concrete bunkers face a frozen forest. Lieutenant Frank Delaney, 26, commands 2 Browning M1919A4 machine guns with skeleton crews of 3 men each. Intelligence reports indicate the 2nd Panzer Division ahead, moving with MG42s in squad support. The math is brutal. Each German gun spits 1,200 rounds per minute. Each Browning manages just over 500. Delaney has 12,000 cartridges split between 2 weapons, 18 spare barrels, and the sinking knowledge that raw numbers don't win firefights. Endurance does. What happens next rewrites the manual on sustained fire. Frank Delaney grew up in Terre Haute, Indiana, where his father ran a machine shop that serviced railroad equipment. The boy learned early that heat warps metal, that rhythm matters more than speed, that the machine that runs longest wins the contract. He enlisted in 1942 with a trade school certificate in mechanical engineering. By Normandy, he was a sergeant. By the Ardennes, a green lieutenant with 2 squads and a problem that couldn't be solved with courage alone. The bunkers were German construction, abandoned during the September retreat, and now occupied by Americans. Thick concrete walls, narrow firing slits, good fields of fire across 400 yards of open ground sloping toward treeline. Behind Delaney's position, the roads were cut. The 101st Airborne sat encircled in Bastogne proper, 5 miles west. Supplies came in dribs. Ammunition had to last. Each Browning sat on a tripod mount, belt-fed, air-cooled. The crews knew their jobs: gunner, assistant gunner, ammunition bearer. Delaney had drilled them for weeks on barrel changes, 30 seconds flat. Pop the latch, lift the hot barrel with asbestos mitts, slide in the cold one, close the feed tray, chamber the round. The cold helped. At 20 degrees Fahrenheit, steel stayed manageable longer, but condensation formed in the mechanisms. Ice could jam the works. The ammunition came in metal cans, 250 rounds per belt. Delaney did the math constantly. At 500 rounds per minute, each gun could burn through its ammunition in less than 30 seconds of continuous fire. With 12,000 rounds total, they had maybe 45 minutes of sustained combat if they fired without stopping. After that, the position was silent. The enemy could walk up and shake hands. He studied the German doctrine. The MG42 was designed for suppression, massive volumes of fire to pin infantry while maneuver elements flanked. American soldiers called it Hitler's buzzsaw because of its sound, a tearing rasp that shredded nerves before it shredded bodies. But Delaney had read the technical manuals captured in France. The MG42's rate of fire created tremendous heat. Barrels wore out fast, and that speed meant ammunition vanished in seconds. The key was patience. Delaney gathered his crews the night before the Germans arrived. 6 men, cold and tired, huddled in the bunker with a lantern throwing shadows on concrete. He drew diagrams on the back of a ration carton. Short bursts, 8 to 10 rounds. Pause, aim, fire again, alternate guns. Never let both go silent at once. Conserve barrels. Trust the math. "They'll sound like the end of the world," he said. "Don't panic. They'll stop. They have to. When they do, we're still shooting." A private named Kowalski asked the obvious question. "What if they don't stop, sir?" Delaney looked at him. "Then we're dead anyway. But they will." The Germans came at 8:40 on December 20th. 3 squads, maybe 40 men, advancing in staggered formation through the trees. Delaney watched them through binoculars. They moved well, professionals. Behind them, 3 MG42 teams set up in defilade positions, tripods dug into snow. The sound started before he saw muzzle flash. A roar like tearing canvas, magnified. Bullets chewed the frozen ground in front of the bunkers, throwing up geysers of snow and dirt. The tracers looked like horizontal rain. The noise filled the world. Kowalski flinched, pressing himself against the concrete. "Wait," Delaney said. The MG42s kept firing. 5 seconds. 10. 15. The earth between the bunkers and the tree line became a moonscape, cratered and torn. Then, abruptly, one gun stopped. 8 seconds of silence while the crew changed barrels. Metal hissed against snow as they dropped the hot barrel to cool. "Number 1 gun, fire," Delaney said. The Browning opened up. Methodical, controlled. The gunner squeezed the trigger in short bursts. 8 rounds. Pause. 8 rounds. Delaney counted silently, watched the impacts. Tracers marked the trajectory, arcing toward the tree line. 1 German soldier fell, then another. The MG42 resumed. 2 more bursts, then stopped for ammunition. 20 seconds, while the assistant gunner fed a new belt. The second Browning picked up the rhythm. Same pattern. Short bursts. Aimed fire. The sound was different. Not a scream, but a steady drumbeat. By noon, the pattern was clear. The German guns fired in massive salvos, hundreds of rounds in seconds, then went silent for barrel changes or ammunition. The American guns fired constantly, never stopping, never overwhelming, just always there. When one paused, the other took over. The field was never quiet. The first German assault broke at 9:15. The infantry tried to advance during an MG42 firing cycle, using the suppression to cover movement. But when the big guns stopped to reload, the Brownings were still talking. Methodical, unceasing. The attackers went to ground, then retreated. They left 2 dead in the snow. Delaney logged the engagement in his notebook. Rounds fired, approximately 800. Barrels changed, 1. Temperature of weapon, manageable. Enemy casualties, 2 confirmed. Time to next engagement, unknown. The answer came 2 hours later. The second attack was heavier. 6 squads this time, maybe 80 men, with 5 MG42 positions providing covering fire. The Germans had learned. They concentrated fire on one bunker, trying to suppress it completely, then shifted to the next. The volume was incredible. It sounded like the air itself was tearing apart. Delaney's left-hand bunker took the brunt. Concrete chips flew. The firing slit became a tunnel of tracers. The gunner, a corporal named Martinez, kept his hands on the Browning and counted bursts. 5 rounds. Pause. 5 rounds. The assistant fed ammunition without looking up, working by feel. When an MG42 paused, Martinez adjusted aim and put a burst exactly where the muzzle flash had been. The right-hand gun maintained steady fire on the advancing infantry. Delaney watched through the slit, calculating. The Germans were burning through ammunition. Each MG42 team carried maybe 2,000 rounds. At 1,200 per minute, that was 90 seconds of fire, spread across reloads and barrel changes. They could sustain this for maybe 10 minutes before needing resupply. The Brownings had all day. At 11:30, the German fire slackened, not stopped, but noticeably reduced. Delaney heard it in the rhythm. Longer pauses, fewer guns active at once. They were conserving ammunition now, picking their moments. The assault teams withdrew to tree line, regrouped. The field went quiet, except for wind and the crackle of small fires where tracers had ignited dry brush. Delaney's crews checked their weapons. Barrels warm, but not critical. 3 cans of ammunition expended per gun. Martinez's hands shook slightly, adrenaline draining away, but the Browning was clean and functional. Kowalski asked if they'd won. "We're still here," Delaney said. "That's all winning is." In the afternoon, a runner arrived from battalion with a message. No resupply for 48 hours. Conserve ammunition. The words hit like a punch. Delaney recalculated. Less than 9,000 rounds remaining. If the Germans came again with the same intensity, the math ran out. He called the gun crews together. New doctrine. 3-round bursts. Longer pauses. Aim every shot. Coordinate fire. Never let both guns shoot at once unless absolutely necessary. Make the enemy think there are more guns than there are. Make every round matter. A sergeant named Fletcher said what everyone thought. 3 rounds won't stop a charge, sir. No, Delaney agreed. But 30 well-aimed bursts over 10 minutes will. They don't know how much ammunition we have. They just know we never stop shooting. The evening attack came at 17:45 under failing light. The Germans used the darkness, advancing in small groups while MG42s provided suppression from farther back. Delaney's new doctrine went into effect immediately. 3 rounds from the left gun. Pause. 3 from the right. Pause. Back to the left. The rhythm was almost conversational, but deadly exchange of precisely placed fire. The Germans hesitated. They'd been expecting either silence or full suppression. This measured response confused them. Fire came from different positions, but never overwhelming amounts. Was it 1 gun or 2? Were there more in reserve? The advance slowed, then stopped. Squads took cover and waited for orders. The MG42s hammered away, trying to create the cover fire their infantry needed. But now Delaney's crews were watching for the barrel changes, the ammunition swaps. Every time a German gun paused, a Browning put a burst directly at its position. Accurate, economical, terrifying. By 1900, the Germans pulled back. They'd burned through thousands of rounds and gained nothing. Delaney's crews had fired less than 1,500 rounds total. The math was starting to work. That night, they huddled in the bunkers with wool blankets and cold rations. The temperature dropped to 15 degrees. Ice formed on the gun barrels. Martinez cleaned his Browning by lantern light, working oil into the mechanisms to prevent freezing. Fletcher counted ammunition, logging every belt, every can. Delaney wrote in his notebook, not tactics or kill counts, but observations. Temperature affects rate of fire. Cold metal stays stable longer. Condensation is the enemy. Rhythm matters more than volume. Patience is a weapon. Outside, the snow fell steadily, covering the craters and the frozen dead. December 21st dawned gray and cold. Delaney woke to the sound of engines. Through binoculars, he watched German trucks moving along the forest road, bringing supplies, ammunition, reinforcements. The MG42 teams were being resupplied. The afternoon would bring another attack, heavier than before. He gathered his crews. They looked exhausted, faces drawn, eyes red, but the guns were clean and ready. He explained the new math. Less than 7,000 rounds remaining. 48 hours until resupply. Maybe longer if the roads stayed cut. Every burst had to count. A private asked the question nobody wanted to voice. What if we run out? Delaney didn't sugarcoat it. Then we use rifles, then bayonets, then rocks. But we don't run out, because we're smarter than they are. The attack came at 1400. 8 squads this time, over 100 men, with concentrated MG42 fire from 7 positions. The volume was apocalyptic. Snow vaporized. Trees splintered. The concrete bunkers shook with impacts. Delaney could barely hear himself think. But the doctrine held. Short bursts, coordinated fire. One gun always active, never both. When an MG42 paused, that's when the Brownings spoke. 3 rounds, precisely aimed. Then silence while the other gun took over. The Germans advanced through the maelstrom, but the American fire never stopped, never let up, never gave them the silence they needed to move freely. Martinez's gun jammed at 1420. A spent casing caught in the feed mechanism, bent from cold or stress. The assistant gunner cleared it in 15 seconds, fingers working frantically. During those 15 seconds, Fletcher's gun maintained fire alone, steady and methodical. When Martinez came back online, the rhythm resumed without a break. At 1500 hours, a German squad reached within 100 yards, close enough that Delaney could see faces, close enough that individual shots mattered. He took personal control of the right-hand gun, sighting through the crude rear aperture. Squeezed the trigger. 3 rounds. A German soldier fell. 3 more. Another. The squad broke and scattered, leaving wounded in the snow. The MG42s were struggling now. Delaney could hear it in the changed rhythm. Longer pauses between bursts. More frequent barrel changes. They were running hot, pushing their weapons beyond sustainable limits. One gun went silent and didn't resume, either jammed or out of ammunition. By 1600 hours, the assault collapsed. The Germans withdrew in disorder, leaving equipment scattered. One MG42 tripod abandoned in place, ammunition cans emptied. The field was littered with brass casings, German and American mixed together in the snow. Delaney checked his guns, both functional. 2 barrels changed during the engagement. Ammunition expended, 2,800 rounds. Enemy casualties, estimated 18 to 20. Cost per casualty, approximately 150 rounds. Sustainable. The next morning, German engineers approached under white flag to collect wounded. Delaney watched through binoculars as they examined the abandoned MG42 position. One man picked up a barrel, dropped it immediately, shaking his hand. Still hot after 12 hours. The barrel was visibly deformed, warped from sustained high-rate fire. A lieutenant from battalion headquarters arrived at noon, slogging through snow. He wanted to know how Delaney's position was still active when other units had been overrun or forced to withdraw. Delaney handed him the notebook. The lieutenant read slowly. Rounds fired per hour, barrel temperatures, burst patterns, enemy movement during reload cycles. The methodical documentation of 3 days of combat reduced to numbers and observations. "You're treating this like a math problem," the lieutenant said. "It is a math problem," Delaney replied. "They have more bullets. We have more time. Time wins." Word spread through the battalion. Then the regiment. Other machine gun sections started adopting the pattern. Short bursts, coordinated fire, never go silent. Several commanders requested Delaney write up his observations formally. He did, that night by lantern light, in clear prose that read more like an engineering report than a combat narrative. The report reached division artillery by December 24th. On Christmas Day, while the siege of Bastogne continued, staff officers were already incorporating sustained fire doctrine into training memoranda. The phrase Delaney method appeared in a colonel's notes, though Delaney never knew it. Meanwhile, the German attacks continued, but with decreasing intensity. Their ammunition situation was becoming critical. The MG42s, for all their fearsome reputation, had consumed tens of thousands of rounds without breaking the American line. The Brownings, slower and less dramatic, had simply outlasted them. On December 26th, Patton's Third Army broke through from the south. The siege lifted. Fresh supplies arrived, including ammunition that Delaney's crews no longer desperately needed. They'd held with less than 2,000 rounds remaining, but they'd held. Delaney's guns fired their last combat rounds on January 3, 1945. A probe by German reconnaissance quickly repulsed. After that, the line stabilized. The Battle of the Bulge wound down. Winter continued, but the crisis had passed. British engineers visited the sector in mid-January, collecting data for comparative analysis. A sergeant examined Delaney's Brownings, checked the barrel logs, counted expended casings. His report noted that one gun had fired 3,800 rounds without a barrel change, far exceeding normal operational parameters. The sustained low rate of fire had kept temperatures manageable. The same engineers examined captured German equipment, MG42s with cracked barrels, deformed feed mechanisms, burnt-out components. One gun's receiver had stress fractures from thermal cycling. The ammunition expenditure was staggering, over 20,000 rounds per gun position, with estimated hit rates below 30% after the first minute of each engagement. The sergeant's summary was succinct. The MG42 is a short storm. The Browning is a long season. That phrase made it into British after-action reports, then American ones. By February, training schools at Fort Benning were teaching a modified doctrine based on Delaney's combat logs. Emphasis shifted from maximum rate of fire to sustained fire capability. Instructors taught burst control, thermal management, ammunition conservation. The mathematics were clear. A gun that fires 500 rounds per minute for 20 minutes delivers more effective fire than a gun that fires 1,200 rounds per minute for 5. Reliability trumps raw speed. Endurance beats intensity. Logistics officers took note too. Supply chains adapted to the new doctrine, reducing ammunition allocations per machine gun section by 20%. The savings in shipping capacity alone justified the change. Fewer bullets fired meant more bullets available where they mattered. For Delaney, the recognition came quietly. A commendation in his service record, a captain's bar in March, an invitation to lecture at the infantry school in the fall, which he declined. He didn't want to teach. He wanted to go home. He was discharged in August 1945, 3 weeks after VJ Day. Returned to Terre Haute. Married a girl named Helen, who'd waded through 3 years of letters. Took over his father's machine shop. He never spoke publicly about the war, never attended reunions, never sought attention. But he did teach, in his way. Young machinist apprentices learned that speed without control is waste, that the machine that runs longest is usually the one that runs slowest, that patience is engineering. The lessons of the Ardennes translated into civilian work, training a generation of craftsmen who never knew they were learning combat doctrine. The Browning M19 19A4 remained in U.S. service for decades. Later models increased the rate of fire, but the doctrine of controlled bursts persisted. Vietnam, Korea, every conflict where American machine guns spoke, they spoke in the rhythm Delaney had documented in a concrete bunker outside Bastogne. The MG42 influenced post-war designs worldwide. The N60, the FN Mag, dozens of weapons borrowed its operating system. But they also incorporated something else, less tangible. The recognition that raw cyclic rate isn't everything, that a gun is only as good as the time it can stay in the fight. In 1952, a technical manual designated FM 23-55, Browning machine gun caliber .30, M19 19A4, included a section on sustained fire techniques. It recommended 8 to 10 round bursts, alternating guns in 2-gun sections, and temperature monitoring at 15-minute intervals during extended engagements. The citations referenced combat data, Ardennes Sector, December 1944. Delaney's name appeared nowhere in the manual. But his notebook observations, translated into doctrine, trained tens of thousands of soldiers. The math he'd calculated in freezing bunkers became standard procedure. The patience he'd enforced under fire became military dogma. By the 1960s, few active-duty personnel remembered the specific engagement. The institutional memory simplified it to a principle. Sustained fire beats rapid fire in defensive positions. The details faded, but the lesson endured. Delaney himself rarely thought about it in tactical terms. When he did remember those December days, he thought about Martinez's steady hands, Fletcher's quiet competence, Kowalski's fear overcome. He thought about how they'd trusted him when the math said they should panic. He thought about the sound of Brownings in winter, methodical and unceasing. He died in 1987, age 69, of heart failure. The obituary mentioned his machine shop, his marriage, his children and grandchildren. It noted his military service, veteran of the Battle of the Bulge, without elaboration. Nobody at the funeral knew he'd changed how armies think about machine guns. But in archives at Fort Benning, his combat notebook sits preserved in acid-free folders. In military history classes, instructors occasionally reference the Bastogne Fire Management Case Study, and in training exercises worldwide, when machine gunners learn to control their rate of fire, to coordinate with partner guns, to trust math over adrenaline. They're learning from a cold lieutenant who understood that winning isn't about who shoots fastest, but who's still shooting when everyone else has gone silent. The echo that remains from the Ardennes isn't the scream of Hitler's buzzsaw. It's the steady, patient drumbeat of Brownings that refuse to quit, manned by crews who learned that in war, as in engineering, the machine that lasts wins. Not because it's faster or louder, but because when everything else has burned out, broken down, or run dry, it's still there, still working, still in the fight. That's the lesson. Not heroic, not glorious, just true. Endurance defeats intensity. Patience outlasts panic. And sometimes the quieter gun has the final word.